The last sight during her morning free had been quietly and persistently tugging at her awareness all day. Some of it, she knew, was the call of a task nearly completed, waiting for a last bit of attention. But of course, there was likely a little more too. She stoked the fire in the wood stove and added 2 big pieces of slow-burning fir, then pulled her cauldron out to fill with water from the spigot. It was on the smaller side, so easier to carry when full and lift onto the stove. Next, she laid in the sprigs of cedar she had harvested earlier and placed the wooden lid on top before donning her work gloves and heading out to the stone pile. She stood there, hands on hips, eyeing up the pile of stones, each hand-chosen and gathered from lands both far and right where she stood. Some had been brought by traveling visitors, some from neighboring homes, but most she had carried up from the sea, picked out of garden beds, or brought in from riversides and roadsides. She stood there, hands on hips, eyeing up the slow-growing labyrinth, measuring by sight and feel what paths remained to be built. It was back-breaking work that she took in shifts, placing each stone one at a time and fitting them together with a twist or a turn. There had been no guideposts staked out, no ground lines drawn. This 7-circuit path winding over itself was being built by feel rather than tape measures. And it felt like there would be just enough stones to complete the final section. Bending to complete the last line of stones, her thoughts turned to how we too need lovingly placed boundaries and personal guidelines to follow. Taking time to implement parameters in life gives us something established to lean into when we feel confused or unsure. There. This massive months-long project was complete. She carefully stood, nursing aches from bending and lifting, and considered her first intentional inquiry for the inaugural walk. Thank you for showing me what I need to know from now until summer solstice. She breathed this inquiry into her body and out into the labyrinth entrance, and slowly began walking. First, just calming her mind, then noticing what began to capture attention on the path, what she heard, new thoughts drifting past. She heard an owl call, even though it was day. That alone gave layers upon layers of meaning to her, for she had worked closely with Owl Spirit for many years. Ravens caught her attention next. The air is always filled with them here, swooping through the trees, strutting along the shore of the bay, chasing each other high, high, high in the sky. Often considered as messengers between the realms, to her they mean home. Looking down at her feet as she walked, she saw there were small tree seedlings that had sprouted among some of the stones she had set last summer and fall. New beginnings. Something very personal, connected with her home. A fresh newness is, or will be, afoot. As she strung the 3 omens together, she arrived at the center of the new labyrinth. Perhaps it's the beginning of many, many divination walks here. The start of what could become a potent medicine place. She knelt down to place her hands on the earth at the very center. She felt love and the tenderness of right relation well up inside her and flow through her hands and feet into the soil, the stones, the plants, and trees around her. She could feel, too, this love being returned, enveloping her, wrapping her like a warm embrace. After a few minutes, she stood and slowly retraced her steps, following the path wind and fold back over itself 7 times until she reached the entrance. She turned, with her hands in prayer, to face the labyrinth in gratitude before heading inside the temple space to retrieve her cedar tea from the wood stove.